All righty, Jesse. Well, it's halftime, and we're coming out of halftime, coming out of the locker room. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am. It's time for me to take this show on home.
All right, we've got plenty that we're going to hit here in rapid fire. We've got plenty of Notre Dame stuff, plenty of and we'll actually in tomorrow's rapid fire we'll have more NFL draft talk as it pertains to Notre Dame as well. My question, though, right now, to lead you off in this one, between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey, who has more pressure on him in the battle to win Notre Dame's QB1 job?
This is an interesting question because I don't know. It's like, is there? I thought the most pressure was on the guy that ended up transferring, right? And so I feel like ever since Angeli left, it has actually maybe taken that pressure off of them to a bit of uh, to a degree, because now it's a two-man race, and that either one of them is going to be the starter, and they essentially have a 50-50 chance. But I would say that there is more pressure on CJ Carr at the end of the day, and the rationale that I'm going to go with is I think he's a bit more talented, and he's a bit younger as well. And so if he doesn't get the starting position, he would kind of have to transfer out, restart, and essentially kind of
Well, he
find
doesn't have to,
a
but
new
it
home.
would make sense for him to do that.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's ultimately what would happen if Minchey got the starting position, in my opinion. Um, I think that he would end up transferring out. But then you look at on the flip side, I think Minchey has a little bit less to lose because he's more under the radar. He's not highly recruited. He's not, considered maybe the next great or the next prophecy at the quarterback position since Brady Quinn, Jimmy Clausen, whoever you want to put on that list. But if you're Kenny Minchey, the part that would make it a little bit more tougher for him is he's later on in his career. So his hourglass of sand, if you will, is getting shorter and shorter, right? Like his gap for actually being a college quarterback is getting smaller. CJ Carr, if he didn't get the starting position, he would naturally have more time to figure it out elsewhere. So I think that would bode well for him. But I think just because, Kenny Minchey isn't as talented as CJ Carr, he's a little bit under radar. He doesn't get as much kind of publicity as CJ Carr does. CJ Carr is like considered the golden child pretty much right now, I think, at Notre Dame. And so, again, it's very even, and I think you could make an argument for both sides. But I would have to lean towards CJ Carr just because of everything that comes with him, the name, his talent coming out of high school, and the expectations to really turn this quarterback room around at Notre Dame and no longer have to be, a portal team when in terms of searching for
Right.
a starting quarterback. They want a guy that they can develop and have for multiple years.
DJ says they both have pressure, and I agree with that. I think they
Right.
both do have a certain amount of pressure on them because they're battling to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. But the question is, who has more pressure? Because I do think you can build a case for both of them. And, kind of like what you were alluding to with CJ Carr, there are all these expectations on him, and like there's been a certain amount of hype that comes with being CJ Carr through his recruitment, obviously going back to what his last name is, the fact that he is the grandson of a Michigan head coach who, other than Jim Harbaugh, was the next most recent to win a national championship. And like I think he took himself away from a lot of the pressure that would have come with being potentially the quarterback at Michigan and everything that would have come with that. I think the microscope, even as much microscope and focus as comes with being the quarterback at Notre Dame, I think there would have been even more for him at Michigan because of that, because that he is the grandson of Lloyd Carr. And his dad obviously played there as well. So I think that there would have been even more had he gone there. Now, there's still a certain amount that comes here because, again, of how good he is, because of all the talk and the hype and the expectation that he is now going to be the guy. I think there's more on Kenny Minchey, though, because of the fact that Kenny Minchey didn't come in with necessarily the same hype, but in terms of recruiting rankings, he came in obviously, higher rated than Steve Angeli, and a lot of people, justifiably so, were very excited when Notre Dame was able to flip him from Pittsburgh when he came in, and we've kind of been waiting to see what he can do. And now, because he's a year older than CJ Carr, I think there's more on Kenny Minchey in terms of what's going to happen in his career. Because like you said, if Carr doesn't win it, then odds are that he transfers out. But I mean, it's definitely the same for Kenny Minchey, that he's most likely going to transfer out at some point if he doesn't get the job. So I feel like there's more for him because he's a year older. That clock has already started. He's used a redshirt year already. So, he'll either have unless if he were to lose the job in fall training camp and he just decided, well, I'm done, I'm gone, then you would gain an extra season, obviously, of eligibility that way. But otherwise, there's more on the line, I think, for Minchey because of what happens if he doesn't win the job. You good over there?
Yeah, sorry, my allergies have just been attacking me today.
That'll happen. It's springtime in the Midwest. The trees there in Cleveland, though, none of that's as bad as when you used to live in Michigan, is it?
No,
the allergies even worse up there?
No, the allergies were definitely worse in Michigan. It's just with the fluctuating temperatures, it's like a changing seasons every day, and so
yeah, I know.
My allergies just
from morning to afternoon sometimes.
Right, and so it's in the morning I feel fine, but then when I leave work and start going outside and it's a little bit warmer, then all the pollen and stuff is all in the air, and it drives my eyeballs crazy. And it's I take an allergy pill every morning, and it might be the interaction with my contacts as well. So I just need to get LASIK eye surgery, I think, and it would alleviate a lot of my problems.
There you go. Costs money though. DJ saying no Cowboys stuff in terms of draft talk tomorrow. I cannot guarantee you anything.
I mean, the draft is in 2 days,
That's right. Gotta throw something out there. We tend to, if we do Cowboys talk in rapid fire, we tend to save it for one of the last topics, right? We let ourselves vent at the end of the show, and we do all the other more pertinent stuff first, but we save our time. We save ourselves those last few minutes to vent
our
on
monologues.
That's right. Let's stick with the quarterbacks. Give me 2 words to describe CJ Carr.
Yeah, I think word number 1 would be gifted. And then the second word would be, I'm trying to find a word that can encapsulate kind of the stuff that I'm going to go with charismatic. And If you ask me to elaborate, I'd be more than happy.
Absolutely.
So
I didn't want just 2 words from you. Give me your 2 words and then explain.
So gifted, the reason I go with gifted is I think he has tremendous arm talent. I think he has really good accuracy, and the ability to kind of what I would call the Patrick Mahomes effect. He can go off schedule and throw those sidearm passes, 3-quarter passes,
arm talent.
Arm talent. And so I think all of that falls under gifted. Big arm, accurate arm, can make a multitude of different kinds of throws. So that's where I'm going with gifted. And then when I'm talking about charismatic, I use the word charismatic because I think he's a natural leader. And more importantly, I would consider him kind of a nerd of the football game. And you're only a nerd of the game when you're passionate about something or when you're charismatic about something. I think often a lot of people talk about, how impressed they are with CJ Carr's ability to really dive into the game and want to understand the game, the X's and O's, the playbook and that sort of stuff. And I think he really loves, the technical aspect of the game, and he's always eager to learn more and be better. And so that's where I came up with the word charismatic, because you have to be passionate and charismatic about what you're doing if you ultimately are, diving headfirst into the finer details and the technicalities of what you're doing.
So charismatic, and what was the first one?
Gifted.
Okay. It's in terms of the gifted, I don't think that I'm too far off with what I went with. And I kind of ended up Not kind of, I did. I ended up just going a little alliteration here. I know they don't teach that word to you in math class, but polished prodigy is what I went with. Polished prodigy. He's not a finished product, but I think that it's more than obvious that Carr has an advanced approach and a feel for the game that stood out when we saw him, first a year ago in the blue gold game and in some practices. And that's what stands out about him right now as well, because like we've seen so many quarterbacks at the same stage in their career where it's like, well, he does X well, but he really struggles with Y, like that kind of like you don't say that about CJ Carr. He's got great pocket presence, his footwork, I guess what you don't say is he's got good pocket presence, but his footwork could use some work. Like, and like he's got inconsistent ball placement, as a result. We're not saying those kind of things about CJ Carr. So don't get it twisted, like if you're listening to what I was saying there. So, we had someone in the show chat yesterday asking about Angeli and still advocating for Steve Angeli. And he was saying, well, couldn't Angeli still improve if he played more this year? Like if he was the starter, couldn't he still improve? Well, sure, to some extent, but more playing time wasn't going to make his arm stronger than Carr's. And, and Carr has that with less playing time than what Angeli has already. Carr is already better at the pre-snap reads and, going through his progressions, throwing guys open and just on down the line. And so, again, to me, there's a lot of polish for a guy who's only played a couple of snaps. And again, like going back to, all the expectations and everything that came with him when he came out of Michigan, you can see why all those kind of expectations are there because of the polish that he has for so little experience and for a guy who's still as young as he is.
Okay.
So now let's do it with Kenny Minchey. 2 words to describe Kenny Minchey. Go.
Yeah, this one was a little bit tougher. The first word I'm going to go with is gunslinger, and the second word I'll go with is wild card.
So you're going like double compound words there. Gunslinger, wild card. Okay.
Yeah. So
you might technically be cheating, but I'll allow it for this little exercise here.
So the reason I'm going to go with gunslinger is I think that, he's, in terms of making decisions, I think he's, pretty explosive with the ball, and he has kind of less regard technically, like he's more prone to, I think, just kind of cutting the ball loose and then, dealing with the consequences after type situation. He's like, it's that old saying of, like, are you going to ask for forgiveness before or after? He's the guy who's going to do it and then ask for forgiveness afterwards type situation. And so I think that he's got that little bit of a gunslinger mentality. He's willing to cut the ball loose. He's not so worried about the consequences. He just kind of wants to make a play, and he wants to make an explosive play at the end of the day. So I'm going to go with gunslinger to start. And then for wild card, I think I wanted to go with wild card because of 2 things. What I was talking about earlier, he's a bit more under the radar and not as, a household name like CJ Carr is. But then also why I say wild card is because I think there's more to his game is more dynamic than CJ Carr's. And we saw that in the spring game. I think he's got more of Riley Leonard in him, the ability to kind of roll out, make plays with his feet, extend the pocket, make some throws on the run type situation. And so for that reason, I consider him a bit of a wild card in terms of, his style of play.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like much like Leonard, like you roll him out there and he might not just look like a classic quarterback, but there's so much athleticism and ability and a big arm and, all those like different things that you can't teach that come with Kenny Minchey's game, a la a guy like Riley Leonard. And so that's why I went alliteration again, ascending athlete, because we've always known what a great athlete Minchey is, but now we're seeing him put it all together, and his overall play as a quarterback is now ascending as well. And you can see that he's at a different level with his own reads and progressions, and the tools are obviously there as well. You don't see Minchey, like getting hung up on reads and some of that kind of stuff. It doesn't look too fast for him. He obviously has the tools as well. We saw him with the arm throwing the ball downfield a couple of weeks ago at the Blue Gold game. So just an athlete who's ascending as an overall quarterback now is where I put Kenny Minchey. Those are my words for him. I don't think that we were too far apart. DK. That's only one word, DK.
Yeah, and you use that same word for the guy who's no longer on the team. So I'll take that one with a grain of salt.
Speaking of which, I have a can of worms that I just felt like opening up here on the show today. Because there's always a quarterback you can talk about who's going to get people stirred up one way or another, and his name is Steve Angeli. So fill in the blank. Steve Angeli visited Syracuse this week. Steve Wiltfong from On3 has him crystal balled to land now at Syracuse out of the transfer portal. Notre Dame hosts the Orange on Senior Day this season, November 22nd. And it's blank that some fans think Steve Angeli should be honored as a senior at Notre Dame Stadium on that day, even though he's playing for Syracuse.
Yeah, I struggled here to come up with a word that wouldn't be insulting. So I'm going to go with blasphemy. It's blasphemy that people think that Steve Angeli should be honored on Senior Day, even though he would be playing for a completely different team. And the reason why it's blasphemy, if he wanted to be recognized, he wouldn't have left. If you want to be recognized as a Notre Dame senior,
right,
then you don't leave. You're not. Notre Dame doesn't need to honor anyone that's not a part of their team anymore. And it's not like Steve Angeli was this tremendous.
It's literally the meaning of Senior Day.
There's no, Steve Angeli, yes, he had a couple of moments, but he never left a legacy at Notre Dame. It's not like he was a guy who started for 2 or 3 years and then a young guy came in and they decided they needed to kind of move on. Like this isn't Tua and Jalen Hurts vibes where, Tua comes in, he's the young guy and they replace Jalen, and Jalen still has the ability to go on to Oklahoma and be super successful and, all the things that came with it. Like he has no legacy at Notre Dame. He will be remembered for his Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl victory and a couple of throws that he made against Penn State, and even if he left some legacy at Notre Dame, he's no longer a part of Notre Dame for this season. So it's just blasphemy. It's stupid. And I hope people really don't think that. And if you do, just sit down and maybe think about it a little bit more.
It's straight up ludicrous is what it is to think that this would be a thing. You only honor seniors, and obviously in some case grad students, who are playing on your team, playing for your team on Senior Day. It is literally the point of Senior Day, is you honor the players who made it from the start of their career until the end of their career at Notre Dame or whatever school that you happen to be at. What are we going to do?
Give him a letter jacket too?
Right. Here's your monogram. I'm sure he already has one of those, but it's literally the point of Senior Day is to honor the players who have stuck all the way through, in your program from start to finish. That is the point of Senior Day. There are plenty of Notre Dame players who play for 3 years and then leave after their junior season to declare for the NFL draft. Well, guess what? They don't get Senior Day recognition either. And, they don't bring them back the next year when they're playing for their NFL team and say, hey, come on, be recognized for Senior Day. It is for seniors. And to be a senior, you have to be there for at least 4 years. And again, grad students get honored too. But Steve Angeli has only completed 3 years at Notre Dame. I realize he has his degree, but he doesn't even meet the requirement to be a senior. He will be a senior with another school now, and like if he had completed 4 years at Notre Dame, he would have been honored at last year's Senior Day when they played Virginia. And oh, by the way, do you know who also played for Virginia and was at Notre Dame Stadium on Senior Day last November? a guy named Chris Tyree, who, of course, started his career at Notre Dame. Did they honor Chris Tyree, who did more in his career at Notre Dame than Steve Angeli did in his? No, they did not. That is the answer. No, they did not honor Chris Tyree on Notre Dame senior day when he played for Virginia. So I don't have a problem with Angeli. He worked hard. He got his Notre Dame degree, but so have hundreds of others who have come through the program. And you don't hear them being talked about the way Steve Angeli is being talked about. And I feel like so much of this groundswell comes from a lot of these disingenuous other people in the media who built Steve Angeli up to be something that ultimately he was not. I don't wish him any ill will. He's in the transfer portal. He's going to be playing for someplace else, but he's not on your program. And you don't honor people who are not on your program and who don't meet the minimal requirement to be a senior in your program on senior day. That's literally what senior day is for. So it's just ludicrous that anyone would think that he or anyone else should be honored. So, he is being crystal balled, though, to Syracuse. And Jesse, Vince and I are pretty excited about this, I have to say.
Yeah. So there's a couple caveats to this.
Oh, here we go with the caveats.
You guys, if he ends up at Syracuse, you'll get your food. But there's a couple things. One,
you're damn right we'll get our food. There's no debate on that.
But the thing is, it's kind of, in my opinion, cheating a little bit, considering he's got pre-existing connections to Syracuse. And I mean, my thing is even if he goes to one of those places, Syracuse, maybe another Power 4, he's not going to be the starter. Like, I mean, Steve Angeli's game is not Syracuse, comparable to Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord started an entire season for Ohio State, one of the best teams in the country, and went on to set all these passing records at Syracuse. If you think Steve Angeli is stepping in and just going to, pick up the torch where it's left off, I'm sorry. It's just, I don't believe, if he truly wants to have an impact and play meaningful games, Power 4 was not the option for him. But if he goes there, yes, you guys win the bet, and that's completely fine. I just don't think he's going to be as successful as he could. He's not going to maximize his potential.
I understand, but as we were trying to tell you last week, and we really were trying to talk you out of this wager to some extent, but you doubled down and you insisted on it. Like, it doesn't matter what the rest of us think about what Steve Angeli and where he belongs and what his place should be. It matters what Steve Angeli thinks. And that was my whole point. Steve Angeli thinks that he's going to go someplace else and be the starting quarterback. Now, going to Syracuse, he's going to walk right into another quarterback battle because Ricky Collins transferred from LSU, and he's going to be battling in fall training camp most likely now to try to be the starting quarterback there. And so obviously if things don't work out, then Steve Angeli could easily be standing on the sidelines, on November 22nd when Syracuse comes to Notre Dame Stadium.
And that's my point. Like,
just like
I felt like Steve should have put himself in a situation where he knew he was going to walk in and be the guy. Like, he was going to be the starter. Like, why would you walk into another quarterback competition? That's where I thought that, like, Power 4 wasn't the best option for him, because if it was truly about starting and not wanting to be a backup and getting your moment, then why would you go to another place where there's a quarterback competition? Go somewhere where you are the guy. Everyone's basically worshiping the ground you're walking on, and you're going to be the starter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, so I realize he's got the connection. His former high school coach is there and all that different stuff, so you've got that, but feels like there had to be some other opportunities potentially for him. I mean, heck, people were talking about him going to Tennessee right off the bat, which was like, think about that. But yeah, I mean, think about, as Ryan was saying, think about going from being the backup quarterback at Notre Dame to being the backup quarterback at Syracuse potentially. So We'll see. And if he loses that battle, I wonder what that does, again, for this Steve Angeli narrative, that's by his ardent supporters as he walks out the door to go to Syracuse. But that'll be something we find out in a few months, if he actually does end up committing to Syracuse.
60% chance. Only a 60% chance.
Yeah. 60%, but there's also percentage-wise, even if he doesn't end up at Syracuse, I still will say he's going to end up at some Power 4 program, even if it's not Syracuse. And I'll be taking my Ruth's Chris from you as a fine reward.
I think we agreed on pizza and Culver's. Pizza for you.
I'll take
Culver's.
pizza. I'll take pizza. You could bring that pizza from that Cleveland spot that I like, the New York style.
Make a special delivery
when you come back later this month.
If it happens to go your way, of course.
On the subject, you mean when it goes my way. On the subject of transfer quarterbacks, fill in the blank. It's blank that after Nico Iamaleava committed to UCLA, UCLA quarterback Joey Aguilar is now headed to Tennessee.
It's comical to me that it's just like a merry-go-round, like Nico leaves. And so what does Tennessee do? They go, well, all right, well, the guy that you're probably going to replace isn't going to be too happy. So we'll go ahead and just take that guy. So I think it's pretty hilarious. And I'm actually going to double down on this. I don't know if you saw this, but early enrollee at Arkansas,
yes,
Nico's brother, yes, is now transferring to UCLA as well. So, like, what sense does that make? One of you has to be the starter. Why are you going to the same place?
Why would you go to the same place? Because obviously, I would think anyway, they went to the same high school. Why would you want to be your brother's backup again?
Right.
Like
what is, but then is this like UCLA's master plan? They're just going to be set at quarterback for the next 6 years and just, it's just going to be, because I'm guessing they're probably very similar, right? Like similar quarterbacks, similar gameplay, similar, strengths, weaknesses. And so like, are you doing a 2-for-1 bundle here basically? And now you got, two brothers for quarterbacks for the next 6 years. I don't know, but the last thing that I would want to do is be my brother's backup at the end of the day. If I had a brother and we were both good enough to play Division I football, the last thing I would want to do is be his backup.
That's the first thing I thought when I saw that is, why would I want to go? Like, okay, yeah, I guess maybe if they're buddy, they're brothers, if they're that close, but why would you want to go back him up? As Andrew says, because Nico thinks he's going pro next year. So little brother, thinks that it's only going to be for, like a 1-year situation. And then he takes the whole thing over. This whole thing is crazy though, because obviously they got an Aguilar from Appalachian State, and he was kind of a, probably not a marquee transfer, but he was a guy, with some experience that UCLA felt pretty good about. And there were some other schools. I thought I saw that North Carolina might have been interested in Aguilar as well. And obviously some other schools were interested in Aguilar. So instead, he kind of just gets the ultimate landing spot. And ultimately, I'll be honest, I think Aguilar is getting the better deal out of this whole thing. He's going to be on a better team, a team that was just in the playoffs last year. UCLA, like Nico can go get his money and have his brother there with him and everything else, but that team is not going to be nearly as good as what Tennessee's going to be this year. So it's kind of, whether it's like a de facto trade or a free agent, kind of signing, I think Aguilar is getting the better deal out of this whole thing.
I thought Joe made a great point in the chat. It's like the Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff trade from a few years ago.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a really good one, actually.
Swapped. And so, but my thing is imagine you're Aguilar. You go from Appalachian State to now you're on an SEC roster. You know what I mean? Like that is what they call coming up in the world. When you can start out at Appalachian State, and now there's a possibility that you're going to be the starting quarterback for Tennessee and the SEC after they just made it to the playoffs last season. I don't know. I just think that's pretty great.
Tyler wants to know who will have the better season. I mean, I think Nico will put up numbers out there in UCLA. Like Joseph is saying, got a good OC. He'll put up some numbers, and like if you listen to Nico and his family, they're saying it was more about the offense than the money. Okay, but Aguilar might not put up the numbers that Nico does, but just like I said, from a team standpoint, Tennessee's gonna ultimately be the better team than UCLA, and it'll give and that offense is a pretty good offensive system to play in as well. Beefeater wants to know: do you think Syracuse paying Angeli for Notre Dame's playbook? Huh? I mean, I don't think they're bringing in Steve Angeli for one game, if that's what you mean. But that is an interesting way to look at it. And as Joe says, it's not even a given that Aguilar will start. But I'm sure that he's getting a decent NIL check for doing it. Speaking of NIL checks, Cooper Flagg is officially leaving Duke after his freshman season after declaring for the NBA draft. My question is, do you think that we'll ever see a men's basketball player ever do what Olivia Miles did, stay in school for NIL money by turning down the chance to be a first-round draft pick?
So you clarified and said first-round draft pick. I took it to an extreme, and I'm still going to say no. And the reason why I say that is because Cooper Flagg, being the number 1 overall pick, is going to receive usually a 4-year rookie contract. And that's on average valued somewhere around $50 million.
Now that's for the entire contract. Like if you look at it per season, I think it's around $14-15 million.
Right.
Right. So the question is, could an NBA or could a college program like Duke, Kentucky, maybe Kansas, like one of the blue bloods, probably, like, could they come up with that kind of money to keep a player around for an extra year?
No. And that's why no. And this is the reason why Olivia Miles is staying, is because Cooper Flagg could make more in his literal rookie season than some of these WNBA players might make in their entire career, strictly just playing in the WNBA. Like no endorsements, strictly your basketball contract. Cooper Flagg year 1 will probably make 10 to 15 million. That's probably more than most WNBA players are going to make in their entire career.
Right. And I realize, and as people are saying in the chat, this is why I'm asking the question, because I know the money is completely different. You're literally talking, like first round picks this year for the WNBA are like $75,000. Next year, they're supposed to be, into 6 figures because of the new collective bargaining agreement and all that stuff, versus what we're talking about, 10 to 15 million for a first round draft pick. But that's my question. Would a college collective be willing to fork out, say 15 to 20 million bucks for essentially the best player in the country to stick around, when you like for what a guy like Cooper Flagg meant to Duke this year? Would they be willing to fork out that kind of money?
No, and I don't think so. And even if you could make the argument, okay, yeah, like number 1 overall, they're obviously going to get the most money. And then maybe you go down the list and say you're the 30th pick of round 1. Well, based off the information that I was able to gather, that person is still making around $3 million a year. And so unless someone in college basketball is going to offer you $3 million or more, why would you go?
I think $3 million. I think that $10 million is not out of the question. Like if you're a Final Four school like Duke and you've got the kind of alumni base that Duke has, like that you couldn't come up with even like $10 million to get that kind of player back and have another chance to get back to the Final Four and actually win the national championship this time. Like I think that that's doable. Like a lottery pick type guy, I think it is virtually like you'll never see that happen. But like to your point, guys, once you get out of the lottery pick range and the farther down in the first round you go, I think it is very possible. But the other side of that is Like Cooper Flagg is not going to fall into
Right.
that range, and like that's the kind of player who you would want to stick around, the kind of guy, because again, it's basketball. So one player can take you a lot farther than one player potentially on a college football team or even a baseball team or whatever it happens to be. But to be the kind of player who can lead you that far, you're going to be much closer to lottery pick range.
I think what also plays into it is these college kids can do one and done. It's not like, uh, women's college basketball where you have to wait, what is it, 3 years essentially before you can become drafted. So, I think that factors into it as well. And, I've always been, and maybe I'm wrong, but I've always been under the impression that a lot of these guys have the mentality of like going to the league is a career aspiration.
Right.
And so even if the money is slightly off, at least making it to like tomorrow's never guaranteed, I guess is what I'm getting at. And if you have a shot to make it to the NBA, I feel like more often than not, you're gonna pull the trigger on that shot, even if you're, maybe gonna lose out on $500,000.
Well, I mean, look
at
at
the end of
Cooper
the day.
Flagg. Like Cooper Flagg was a freshman stud at Duke this year. He reclassified. He was supposed to be a senior in high school this year. That's how good he was. He reclassified so he could come out early and get his clock going early and get to the NBA. To your point,
Right.
Like there's no way a guy like him was going to stick around in school for another year. But I thought it was worth talking about, to see, like
I think you could eventually draw the line somewhere. It's just a matter of where is it like round 1 pick 20? Is it the whole round 1? But I think that you could make the argument once you get to a certain degree in the NBA. I think definitely lottery picks, no way. But as you get into end of round 1, beginning of round 2, I don't think it's off the table to have the discussion of, are these guys more willing to stay an extra year in college? One, so they can improve their draft stock, and two, make similar, if not more money than they would if they went to the NBA.
Yeah. And the other side of this is if you sunk that kind of money into a player to get him to stay and they, the team didn't win the national championship.
Oof.
Or,
You got a
some
lot of unhappy people.
like injury occurred somewhere along the way. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of ticked off people when it's all said and done. Herrick's saying, how much did Ohio State football roster make to stay? Is college basketball players worth the same? And again, it's different in college football. And it was what, between 20 and 25 million, I think, is what everyone was talking about. Like the amount of money that went into Ohio State's roster to get guys to stay and transfer and all that different kind of stuff. But again, one player, because you're talking about 22 players on the field at a time for a football team versus 5 players on the court for basketball. So one elite player in basketball can make much more difference. And if you're at a place like a Duke or a Kentucky or a Kansas or a North Carolina, like those alumni bases, like those are the blue bloods, and it means a lot to them. And I think that you would be able to find a lot of people who would be willing, to invest in one player like that, depending on how high the line goes up. I think 20 million is too high, but I don't think 10 or 12 million is unrealistic. Like to think that you could come up with that kind of money. But the question again would be, would it be worth it to the player? And ultimately, if you're going to be a first round NBA pick, I don't think that ultimately, I don't think it's in the same ballpark. I think that, like you said, guys want to go. They want to be professional basketball players and just focus on basketball, because that's the other aspect of it as well. You don't have to worry about school when you're in the NBA. Joseph said Miles took a big risk. Next year's WNBA draft will be significantly better. Very doubtful she'll be a top 5 pick. Well, I mean, I guess we'll see. I think that at the very least, she thinks she's going to be better. And even if she's not a top 5 pick, she still ends up going in the first round and has somewhere $500,000 in her pocket, that's $500,000 she wasn't going to make, and she still wasn't going to make by regardless of which draft she ended up being in.
This is always an interesting conversation to me because I think being a top 5 draft pick is a double-edged sword. It means you're the best of the best,
but it also
means you're getting picked by a horrible team.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, me personally, like, yeah, it'd be cool to say I was the first overall pick ever, but like, catch me around like round pick 15 or pick 20, so I can go to a team that's on the verge of probably being pretty good, but not quite there. I don't know. I know you get more money too, but I would take less money to be in a more advantageous situation on a team that's, got actual aspirations to make the playoffs. Yeah. And I'm a key part of helping.
Like Aguilar versus Iamaleava that we were just talking about.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, agree, Joe. She's still making more by waiting that extra year. That's what it comes down to. And that's why she decided to make that decision. Joseph had a good comment on Steve Angeli. I meant to throw this up there earlier. He said, "We did not see much of Steve Angeli. However, my lasting memory of him will be his deliberate manner in the Penn State game. Absolutely no fear whatsoever." Yeah. And like, can't it just be that and not making it more than that? All these, different, just to me, what turned out to be, absurd expectations that came off that. Can't we just remember him for being a guy who went in and played a nice part in Notre Dame getting to the national championship game? So Dan Orlovsky says the Pittsburgh Steelers have the worst quarterback situation in the NFL heading into this week's draft, with Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson as their only 2 quarterbacks currently on the roster. Do you buy or sell that?
I'm going to go with a hold, and the reason I'm going to go with a hold is I think there's some other teams that are treading in the same water as the Steelers, and so I want to put some of those teams out there and see if you feel like they have.
I've got a list of my own as well, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I would start within the division. I think the Browns have a pretty similar quarterback situation going on.
It's a little bit better. I mean, they've got Joe Flacco. They won games with Joe Flacco a couple years ago.
Yeah,
I'd rather have Joe Flacco than Mason Rudolph.
He's old as dirt.
But I'd still rather have Flacco than Mason Rudolph.
Okay. So, well, Steelers still win the battle of being in the crappy situation. Let's kind of keep on going down the list. How do we feel about Tennessee with Will Levis at the helm?
I mean, they're at the top of the list, but fortunately for them, they're also at the top of the draft. So yeah, I mean, like they're going to get Cam Ward if that's what they want to do, right? Like, so I agree. Like they're probably in a worse situation, but because of the fact that they draft first and the Steelers draft 21st, there's a big difference there, right?
Big difference there.
Yeah.
Next on my list, as we continue to kind of scroll down here a little bit, I think the Minnesota Vikings belong on this list because JJ McCarthy, yes, he's a highly, thought. There's high expectations of JJ McCarthy, but he got injured and he's never actually taken an NFL snap. At least Mason Rudolph has played games. And the thing is, in Minnesota, there's no one in the queue for backup at this moment. It's all the eggs are on JJ McCarthy and what's his name, Kevin McConnell can do since he's the quarterback whisperer. They're putting all their eggs in Kevin being able to be this quarterback whisperer and develop a quarterback a true rookie quarterback who has never taken a full snap. So I believe the Minnesota Vikings also belong on this list.
I'd still I agree. It's not a great situation, but I mean, McConnell, the fact that he was able to resurrect Sam Darnold last year, I mean, I think you do have to trust him in terms of what he thinks he can get out of JJ McCarthy and the fact that they were confident enough in McCarthy to let Darnold walk. I mean, I agree it's not a great situation, but I would still put it a step behind where the Steelers are, a step or two behind where the Steelers are. Because at least McCarthy is a first round pick. Like there's no true tarnish on him other than the injury that he had last year.
Yeah. Last but not least, I'm going to throw the New Orleans Saints on this list with the contingency that Derek Carr is not playing this season.
Well, yeah, I mean, if Derek Carr's not playing this season, then yeah, the Saints are probably.
Well, you saw the report that he's got another injury. Like there's potential that he's not going to be able to play this season again.
Yeah.
If that's the case, you got Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener, and Ben DiNucci, Dallas legend, as your quarterbacks in line. So I'm going to say if Carr doesn't play, I think the Saints and the Steelers are in very similar situations. And it's take your pick. Would you rather have Spencer Rattler or Mason Rudolph as your quarterback at that point? So
isn't Ben DiNucci's claim to fame, isn't he the one that made the hats with the backward
yes
Dallas thing on the front?
That is his claim to fame.
Yep. Oh, Ben DiNucci. Yeah.
So I think there's a handful, 4 or 5 teams, but the Steelers are definitely 1 or 2 at the end of the day. I think is what I'm ultimately getting at. But they're going to draft someone. I hope they don't. Well, I kind of hope they do bring in Aaron Rodgers because I don't like the Steelers and I don't like Aaron Rodgers, and I hope that whole thing would just go miserably bad. And so if they did bring in Rodgers, that would be kind of funny in my opinion, because again, I don't care about either, and I kind of have distaste for both as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, that's the other thing with the Steelers. You brought in DK Metcalf, and you don't even have a quarterback to throw him the ball, and that is just
Metcalf and George Pickens. It's but who's throwing these guys the ball?
And that is just a huge recipe for disaster if you don't end up with a better quarterback. Even if you have a rookie quarterback, you're going to have a rookie quarterback potentially if you're able to draft one in the first round, and you've got 2 diva receivers that you're going to have fighting for the football, and they're going to be nothing but mad at your quarterback who's going to be sailing balls long or throwing them into the ground and everything else. Salty says, should the Raiders be on that list? I'd take Geno Smith over pretty much any of the quarterbacks that we listed on any of these other teams. That includes Joe Flacco. I'd take Geno.
I'd take Geno with Pete Carroll
feels confident. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The Raiders, the Raiders before they added Geno Smith definitely would have been on that list. But getting Geno changed that quite a bit. Changed it quite drastically. All right. Well, again, we're going to have more draft stuff on tomorrow's show. And of course, the draft starts Thursday night. We got a lot of stuff before that. We've got a Marcus Freeman press conference coming tomorrow as well. Christopher obviously is not a Dak Prescott fan. Man, he has just been bashing Dak this whole show. Just the Dak hate from Christopher. Man, that's disappointing. Hit the like button, though, before you leave. Thanks again to Ryan Roberts for talking a little draft with me earlier. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.